So start thinking about your questions relative to the work that they were talking about. Like I said, I think can't realize that Discovery Farms is 20 years old. How long ago that was with Dennis Frame ranting and raving around the state. So, and tell him I said that if you see him. Okay, anybody, so again, here's the way it goes. Microphone. Please walk to the microphone if you have a question. You know, one thing that strikes me, guys, and it's not really just any one of you, technology. Is there any, commercial entity that's working on technology? Sometimes when you go to the farm shows, you see they're talking about a sensor that's going to be on a plant or something like that. Talk to me about technology. How could technology enter into some of the field demonstrations? Because you know how it is when I can see it. If that sensor turns a different color as nitrogen is leaving, or the soil reacts differently because of another compound that's there to trace. Anything like that that's out there, any commercial partnership that might become a part of these collaborations?
Well, so one of the things could be, there's a lot of interest in soil nitrate sensors and utilizing those, and there's a lot of testing of those types of products, but those would have a lot of promise and actually that quantification. Now, so a lot of the work we're doing, though, it requires a lot of still validation of that technology. But along those lines, I think we're still in a spot where we're doing a good job with. There's a lot of new technologies on the market that can do those measurements. It's just, what do you do with that information? I think it's still a big part of where we're at. So it's exciting, and there's a lot of great stuff on the market. The idea to take it to what do we do with it exactly is where the trick is, or we're still working on.
I think a point about technology is it's a question of technology for understanding the dynamics of water quality responses to practices, or is it technology that farmers use directly to try and impact in a positive way? And so then, of course, in the latter, it's a question of how affordable it is for the producers. So there's technologies out there for varying irrigation rates, or maybe even fertilizer rates in fertigation situations. But the question then is it affordable on a scale that a producer is going to be using here? So yes, those are questions that we're wondering, we're pondering, and also pondering more sophisticated ways of using weather information to help predict the likelihood of a rain event and therefore a leaching event, and can those be incorporated into information that farmers use on a daily basis in deciding whether to apply fertilizer or whether to wait a day or two in a fine-tuning effort to minimize the potential for leaching nitrogen, for example.
I'll have a follow-up on that. Go ahead, Shawnee.
John, is there any way you could put that slide back up that talks about where the farmer-led watershed programs are? I just wanted the group to see that. As I mentioned earlier, I do some.
You mean
on the slide?
The 30 that you have?
I just think it's very important. I do some contract lobbying. One of my clients is the Dairy Business Association. And we just want to talk about how the work that they're doing here, we're starting to see action up in the state capitol. Dean Van Bosch talked about the Dairy Hub and able to do that work and to get university stuff in the Capitol. As I speak to you now, the state Senate just passed a bipartisan bill on nitrate package. It's a small piece, but still, my point is, I'm trying to say is, groups are working together. Dairy Business Association has worked over the last year with Clean Wisconsin, the Land and Water Conservation Association, and the Nature Conservancy. Kind of different political partners that are working together on water quality. One of the strongest arguments we can make is that map that you see there. That is just incredible, because every lawmaker's office we go to, whether it's R or D, red or blue, has something going on in their district. And they all seem to sometimes want to hear what farmers say, and our farmers bought into this stuff. And we can prove to that map shows that. And so I thank you for that, and the work that's being done. It's not an easy process up the street, but there are things that are happening. My question for you is, can we get to a place where, how do we get to it? I'm not asking you to make political statements here, but more carrots instead of sticks. I think farmers want to be part of the solution. Sometimes DNR's got to do what they've got to do, and regulators got to do what they got to do. How are those conversations going with regulators to offer incentives, because I think farmers want to be part of the solution. If the research is solid, Discovery Farms has done great work. Another one of my clients just recognized the work that Eric and Amber had done for that client. How do you work with regulators to do incentives, carrots instead of sticks? Because that's always a buzzsaw that we run into in the political world is, oh, this is going to hammer X, or this is going to increase cost Y, which are legitimate concerns, and people get their danders up. But how can you be helpful in that work? Thank you.
Well, I think the obvious place that the university can be helpful is certainly bringing sound science to that conversation. And that's our fundamental role, and that's one way that Discovery Farms has activated that conversation from an applied sense, right? So I think that's our foundational role as the university, and obviously in our interactions with producers in settings like that and many others, we're obviously part of a question like that. And our response is primarily we bring the science to that equation, but we also recognize that it's more than just science that's driving, and that's a motivator or a barrier to adoption of conservation practices. So we're trying to integrate social science and understanding of what motivates farmers to be engaging and adopting practices. And it isn't just increased knowledge about this X, Y, or Z practice. So, we're incorporating that kind of expertise into the conversation too. And there's plenty of people that are looking at different conservation policies to address both the systemic and the real-term conversations and questions about regulation, and we tend to shy away from those as much as possible.
You might be a little ahead too, Shawnee. That might be coming because I can hardly wait until Jeremy blows the doors off with stuff that he's got going on at his operation specifically. But I still kind of come back to the practical side of show me why I should care. Yes, I care about the groundwater quality, but I'm just thinking something as simple as inefficiencies in the equipment I'm using to apply nitrogen. Well, you take a look at the nitrogen price this year, you're going to catch my attention. If it's speed rate, if it's, war equipment, if it's overlap. I mean, when you start talking about the price I'm paying for nitrogen this year, you get my attention, but quick. But like I said, it can't wait. That message to me can't wait 2 years down the road.
That's a good point, right? And we've got a lot of great, ag engineers, and we talk about that, right? The idea of precision management, how precise can we be with the equipment we have?
Right.
That's a great point. Calibrating manure spreaders.
Yeah.
Calibrating anything.
Yeah.
Is part of it too, and that may be part of the process. So, a good point.
Ed?
Yeah, thank you for saying a key word before, and that was the word technology.
Yeah.
You better grab the mic, Ed. They can't hear you
Okay,
through the fuzzies.
can you hear me now? Okay. Anyway, before I make this comment, you need to know a little bit about me so you understand where I'm coming from. I have a master's degree in soil science from this institution. I was really, really fortunate to have Leo Walsh, former dean of the college, as my major professor getting my degree. If he taught me one thing really important, it's how to look at research data and scrutinize it to see if it's for real. We have a product coming on the market now called Pivot Bio. Pivot Bio, in my opinion, has the chance to technologically change nitrogen management. It's going to be put on with a planter and the furrow, and the reason I'm so excited about it, after 40 years of being a crop consultant, we all know, or we wouldn't be here for today's topic, that the nitrogen cycle is a very leaky cycle. This particular product, technology, Pam, fertilizer prices, Pam. For those of you that are farmers and the O'Hara Pride people, all of the wonderful work you've done, the wonderful work of Discovery Farms, Mark, this particular product is perfect for your research and demonstration. The bottom line that you were talking about there, John, this product needs to be researched by people besides myself. I've looked at the data. I've looked at replicated data across the U.S. I don't see Wisconsin studying this particular product, and I'm just going on record for whatever it's worth. Let's get this product looked at. Just imagine a nitrogen source that you can add to the soil that can't be volatilized, that can't be leached, that cannot be denitrified. It's only produced when the corn plant is growing vigorously, when the corn plant needs it. That's amazing. Just think about that. It produces right at this moment 40 pounds of nitrogen. Think, well, that's not a lot. Well, it's a quarter of the 160 pounds is kind of like the average nitrogen recommendation. That's a quarter of that, and this company is going to get to higher amounts as time goes on. But I'll take the example of my largest client, a large CAFO. He can apply the manure and add a little pivot by with the corn planter, and he's done. He's done for the year. And he works with, and I work with, one of the toughest deals, irrigated sandy soils in the spring green area. So I'm throwing it out there.
Let them speak to it, Ed, if they're going to speak to it. But that's, like I said, not everything that's going on in this subject area is going to be discussed in this room. But the foundational work that's going on here is what helps those things happen.
Well, I'll just, Ed, I think what your comment sparks is just a reminder that there's a lot of innovation and a desire for innovation happening among individual farmers and the ag industry. And that's really one of a driver that I didn't talk about, that there is innovation, a desire for innovation among agriculture, and that's a great way to remind us about that. The other thing about that is the price of nitrogen has caused an intersection with the conversation about water quality, and it's sparked an ability to find intersections between those two and ways that we can find efficiencies, reduce costs, minimize costs of a very expensive input for agriculture production and benefit water quality. And so, that's part of our conversation about minimizing these trade-offs of nutrient losses associated with different practices. But your comment is really well taken in the sense that it sparks a reminder that there's a lot of innovation happening.
Yeah. It's amazing what you didn't know until you start asking these questions and put it in the field. All right, Paul?
I got a quick question. It's for Chris, and it kind of ties in. We've heard about the one thing that really stuck out in your slides, which I'm not going to ask you to pull up because it takes too long, the impact from that Iowa nutrient reduction strategy, how a lot of our standard BMPs weren't as, the big change came from those major transitions in the landscape, and then the article you talked about. Can you, some of your thoughts on how do we get there? How do we make that transformation? Do you know people working on that, or what are your thoughts? Heard about one, I think of the nitrogen fixing corn with the stuff coming out of the brace roots and stuff. There are technical solutions, but some of them are different. I'm not sure. So I'd be curious what you think. How are we going to get there on some of those?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I would go back to folks, examples like Randy Jackson, who's leading this Grassland 2.0 project through the USDA, and having farmers involved in, the research from the beginning to try and demonstrate that transformations away from maybe the way we do things right now, more rotational grazing is economically viable and has win-wins, for the environment. But I think there's still obstacles from an economic standpoint and fear and risk, that go along with trying to get to that transformation. I'm walking around your question about how do we get there, but I think we get there slowly, and I think we get there as we continue to educate society and get them to understand how important farming is to their daily lives. I don't think the common everyday person really understands that right now. And people want cheap food, and maybe it's time to be thinking about that people need you educated, that comes at a cost, to some point. I think some of this is, the farmer-led initiatives, that are going on right in our own county, in Yahara, it's, the map's still, up there. I think as John was saying, in the last 5 or 7 years, these are growing. There's more of that coming online, and I think it's just a matter of time before we start making those, transitions. And I didn't, I think my point probably came across pretty strong. I don't want to downplay the importance of other things we can do with best management practices, but getting the large changes really come with wholesale changes on the landscape. And that's the difficult question to do that. You just can't say, well, stop growing corn. Well, that's not, going to happen. That's a non-starter. So I think we've got to meet in the middle and start to work towards some combination of those things together.
Kelly?
Hi, question for Chris. Kelly Wilfert. I'm an attorney out of Green Bay, but my family farms in Manitowoc. And I was curious in going through your presentation that a number of the kind of core assumptions were from some studies from like 1989 and 1990s. As we talk about innovation and changes not only in technology, but also in, seed genetics and the practices that are being used, do we have updated data on any of that, and or do you see a need for some updated data on that as our base from where we're starting, or are those kind of pretty static?
No, and I think, well, maybe Matt has, or John has some answers to that too, but I think, we're in the era, it would help to have, more data, and even just in measurements of actual leaching and the responses of certain management practices. I mean, we're still trying to catch up and understand how those systems work. I mean, Discovery Farms is one great example of that, but I speak from experience in putting lysimeters at 1.4 meters below the ground. It's hard work to actually observe the amount of nitrate that's moving through a system, and then to try to develop modeling tools that can replicate that, and then try to build precision agricultural tools or better decision support tools that can guide better management. So I think we're a long way away, from being at that point, but we're getting there. But I agree, we do need updated, information, and some of those might be outdated, but it depends too on the type of instrumentation and practice and things like that too, and whether or not there have been advances, in those. In some of the meta-analysis data I had in there were 15 or 16 different ways people were measuring how nitrate moves through the soil, and there's probably 2 of them that I consider the gold standard, but you can't discount all that other data. That's all we have. That's really it. So I don't know. Matt, did you want to, or John, want to comment on any of that? Or?
Well, I'll just say, that we have a surprising lack of nitrate leaching quantification data in the state, and I think we are trying to work on that. Within our Discovery Farms program, we're actually trying to install more sensors, or sensors to quantify the leaching fluxes. So we are trying to catch up and do more on-farm type measurements with that. So we started a process, but it's a lot more cumbersome, believe it or not, than actually doing edge of field water quality.
And that was part of what I was curious of, is it that it was static, hadn't changed, or just that we don't have the data, and maybe that's something that as farmers we can help or at least be aware of as we're looking at it. So thank you.
All right, good points. All right, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. Everybody back in your seats at 2:30 sharp, because then we're going to hear from those watersheds. We're going to hear from the actual producers that have kind of taken personal responsibility to advance some of this. So a 10-minute break, and we'll be back in your seats, 2:30 sharp, please. Thank you, panelists.
COVID exhaustion yet?